At 26, Sophia Vance had built a life far from the uncle who stole her mother's piano. Tonight, her phone buzzed with a name she hadn't seen in years, Matthew. Her attorney. He never called with good news.
Matthew, what's happened?
Sophia, I need you to stay calm. Gary Vance just registered to bid on Lot 204.
Register? Then he doesn't know.
A faint, amused smile touched her lips. On her tablet, the Sotheby's listing for Lot 204, her 1927 Steinway, consigned under a shell entity, the piano from Rachmaninoff's own studio. He's leveraged everything. If he wins, it'll destroy him.
Then let him win, Matthew. I'll be there to watch.
You're going to the auction? Sophia, that's risky. After a decade of silence, the uncle who sold her mother's Steinway had just walked into a trap of his own making. Sophia ended the call, and her faint smile never wavered. 10 years earlier, Sophia was 16, sitting beside a hospital bed. Her mother, Catherine, a concert pianist who could make a Steinway weep, was slipping away.
Mom, please. You always said we'd play duets when I got older. Please don't leave me.
Catherine's hand, weak but determined, pointed to the nightstand. There, a photo of her beloved 1923 Steinway Welta Mignon, the instrument that had recorded her soul onto paper rolls. The machines went quiet at 3:15 a.m. Sophia held her mother's hand until the nurse gently pulled her away. 3 days later, under a heavy rain, they buried her. The mourners huddled under black umbrellas, but Sophia stood apart, staring at the casket.
All I could hear was the rain. And somewhere, in an empty house, the silence of a piano that would never be played by her again.
In the lawyer's office, the air was thick with old paper and new grief. Uncle Gary sat beside Sophia, his expression carefully arranged into sorrow. To my daughter Sophia, I leave my 1923 Steinway Welta Mignon reproducing grand piano. Gary Vance shall serve as guardian of Sophia's person and estate until her 18th birthday.
Of course, I'll take care of everything. Don't you worry, Sophia. We're family.
Sophia didn't answer. She was counting the keys in her head, all 88 of them, the only inheritance that mattered. But Gary was already counting something else. 3 months after the funeral, Sophia returned from school to a moving truck at Catherine's house. 2 men were carrying the shrouded Steinway down the front steps.
Uncle Gary, where are they taking it?
The estate has debts, Sophia. This is necessary. Don't be so emotional.
Emotional? That piano was all I had left of her.
A week later, Sophia glimpsed Gary in his office. A thick fold of cash lay on his desk, and a sold sign leaned against the wall. He hadn't seen her in the doorway, but she saw everything.
Something was wrong, but at 16 I had no proof, no voice.
Sophia? What are you doing here? I told you it's all taken care of.
She walked away without a word. But the doubt planted that day would grow into something Gary couldn't count. And for the next 2 years, she waited. Sophia turned 18 in the house that no longer held her mother's piano. Her guardianship ended, and she started packing away the past. In a forgotten folder of her mother's papers, she found a yellowed appraisal certificate. The piano's name jumped out, Steinway Welta Mignon, 1923. Estimated market value, $400,000. A rare reproducing mechanism, one of fewer than 30 ever built.
40,000. He told me it was for the estate. He lied about everything.
She didn't cry. She stood, placed the certificate in her bag, and walked to the one place she knew he'd be, his office.
You sold it for 40,000. It was worth 10 times that. Where's the money, Uncle Gary?
You're a child. You don't understand how estates work. I did what was necessary.
I understand enough. You pocketed the difference. We're done.
She walked out and never looked back. For 8 years, Sophia kept her distance, from Gary, from the empty space in her mother's living room, from the ache of a silenced heirloom. But the music her mother left in her bones never faded. It only waited for the right instrument to return. For 8 years, Sophia poured herself into the piano. The stages changed, but the void never did.
Every ovation felt like rain on a grave. Applause that never reached my mother.
Then the call came. Her grandmother, Elizabeth, the woman who first taught her scales, was dying in Connecticut.
She whispered a name I didn't recognize, the duo art. She said it was the piano my mother should have had.
Elizabeth passed that night. In the silence, Sophia felt a new weight, a legacy not yet understood.
Sophia, your grandmother's will is unusual. She left you an instrument we couldn't locate at first.
He handed her a faded photograph of a grand piano, a brass plate visible on the frame.
What is it? I've never seen this piano.
A 1927 Steinway duo art, recorded by Rachmaninoff himself. It's been in her attic for 60 years.
Sophia stared at the image, the missing piece, the right instrument. 3 days later, Sophia stood in her grandmother's shuttered drawing room. The air was thick with dust and old secrets.
So this is what Elizabeth left me. Not just a piano, but a ghost of Rachmaninoff.
She lifted the lid. On the inner frame, a brass plate gleamed. Sergei Rachmaninoff, July 1927.
It's authentic. The duo art mechanism inside can still replay his recordings. This changes everything.
That night at her apartment, Sophia opened her laptop. Beside it lay a proposal draft, Catherine Vance Music Education Foundation.
Every note that piano plays will buy a lesson for a child who has nothing. That's the justice my mother deserved.
She drafted an email to Sotheby's specialists, describing the instrument's provenance and her desire for an anonymous consignment.
And I want the proceeds to fund the Catherine Vance Foundation. No publicity, just impact.
She hit send. The piano that had been locked away for 60 years was now in play, aimed at a target only she could see. The consignment was in motion, and the man who had stolen her mother's piano had no idea he was about to bid against the foundation he'd made necessary. A week later, Sophia walked into Sotheby's consignment office. Wood panels, antique violins on display, and Ms. Hart waiting with a leather dossier.
Miss Vance, your grandmother's Steinway is the most significant instrument we've handled in a decade. The foundation angle will attract major philanthropists.
I need absolute discretion. The consignor's name stays private, only an entity on the public record.
Of course, we'll list the seller as the Duo Art Trust. Not even the bidders will access your name. Standard for sellers.
Sophia signed the consignment agreement, her name appearing only once on a confidential addendum. The pen felt heavier than it should.
The catalog goes to print tomorrow. We're placing the Rachmaninoff signature on the cover. Every serious collector from New York to Tokyo will see it.
And the reserve price?
Set at $300,000 with an estimate of 5 to 7. It will sell, Miss Vance. I guarantee it.
Sophia reviewed the glossy proof, the piano lit like a museum artifact. Somewhere, she knew, Gary would see it too. She left with a copy in her bag. In 3 weeks, the room would fill and one chair would be his. The trap was set, and the bait was beautiful. At his vintage piano showroom, Gary slit open the Sotheby's catalog. The cover froze him, a grand piano under museum lights, a brass plate gleaming.
The duo art. Rachmaninoff's own instrument. If I own this, my reputation is made.
He ignored the anonymous seller. The auction date was circled in red. That was all that mattered.
112 Sycamore. It's still half the estate's, but the bank won't know if I list it as fully mine.
Fraud. But desire had replaced integrity years ago. The next morning, he signed the loan agreement. The officer saw a confident dealer, not a man betting stolen assets. The collateral clause listed the property plainly, held by the Catherine Vance estate. He signed anyway.
A formality. I'm the executor. The estate is practically mine.
The bank approved $650,000, enough to outbid anyone. He registered for lot 204 without checking the seller. The trap was set. 2 days before the auction, Matthew called again. His voice carried a new urgency.
I've pulled Gary's loan application. The collateral is 112 Sycamore, your mother's estate. He's risking a property that isn't solely his.
Still trying to profit from her, after everything.
This is reckless. If the bank audits, he's exposed, but that also means he's desperate and dangerous if cornered.
Then let him corner himself. I'll be in the side gallery, watching every bid.
I'll monitor the sale. If anything spikes, I'm filing an emergency motion. Be careful.
After the call, Sophia opened a black velvet box. Inside lay a polished paddle, engraved with her initials for a bid she never intended to place.
Just in case I need to remind him who holds the note.
She placed the paddle into her clutch, then drew her camel coat from the wardrobe. The auction was hours away. At the piano, she ran her fingers across the lid one last time. Tomorrow, it would belong to someone else, or by the rules she'd written, to no one at all. Dusk over London. Beneath a banner that read "Important Instruments," a black town car slowed. Sophia stepped out, her camel coat catching the last light. Inside, the gallery hummed with old money. On the dais, the duo art Steinway glowed under a single spot, its Rachmaninoff plate faintly visible even from the back row. Sophia bypassed the main floor, slipping through a side door marked "Private," a narrow gallery with a velvet rope, her front row seat to the collapse.
Any moment now, he'll walk in, stick his chest out like he owns the room. Just like he did with her piano.
And then he did. Gary Vance, in a brown suit that fit too tightly, claimed a seat near the front. His paddle spun between his fingers like a card shark's token.
The Rachmaninoff. By midnight, it'll be in my showroom, and every critic who ever sneered will line up to shake my hand.
The room settled. Ushers closed the doors. A low murmur gave way to the crisp sound of a program being tapped against a podium. The auctioneer, a tuxedoed figure with a gavel that had ended 1,000 such nights, stepped to the light.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Tonight's catalog offers some of the finest instruments ever placed under a hammer. We begin in 60 seconds.
In the side gallery, Sophia didn't move. A decade of silence had cured her of fidgeting, but her pulse knew what his paddle didn't. The hammer would fall on both of them.
Lot 204, the 1927 Steinway Duo Art, from the studio of Sergei Rachmaninoff. We open at $200,000.
A paddle rose in the back. The auctioneer's hand snapped toward it.
$250, $300, $350, $400,000. Who will give $450?
In the third row, Gary raised his paddle without a flicker. Bold, obvious, the way a man bets with stolen money.
$450,000 from the gentleman in brown. $475 in the room. $500 new bidder at the back.
A ripple moved through the room. The smaller dealers dropped out, paddles resting on laps. Only two remained, Gary and a woman with a silver brooch in the front row.
$500,000 for a piano he stole. He has no idea what it's actually costing him.
Gary leaned forward, jaw tight. He didn't hesitate. $540.
$540 from Mr. Vance. $560 in the room. $580. Do I hear $580?
Silence. Then, the woman with the brooch shook her head. Gary was alone now, the prize inches from his hand.
$580 is the bid. Do I hear $600? $600,000 for this magnificent instrument. $600 from Mr. Vance. $620? $612? $612,000. Fresh bid. Any advance on $612?
The auctioneer looked once around the room. No paddle lifted. The air was glass, ready to shatter.
Fair warning. Sold for $612,000 to the gentleman in brown.
The sound hit the back wall. Gary shot to his feet, hands already clasping the shoulders of the man beside him.
The Rachmaninoff is mine. Did you hear that? Mine.
A few patrons clapped. Others whispered at the price. Gary didn't notice. His kingdom was built on sand, but tonight it felt like marble. In the side gallery, Sophia hadn't moved. Her smile was faint, a private thing that never reached her eyes.
Enjoy the applause, Uncle. It's the last time anyone will clap for you.
She lifted one hand, just a finger really, and smoothed a stray honey blonde wave. Then she waited for the real auction to begin. The applause thinned, Gary cut through the congratulations, heading to the clerk's table where a stack of buyer's forms lay waiting. He lifted the gold pen, a prop he kept for moments like this, and began scrawling his name with a flourish. Then a shadow fell across the page. Ms. Hart, her expression unreadable, stood at his elbow.
Mr. Vance, before we finalize, the consignor has a few conditions that must be addressed.
Conditions? The gavel fell. The sale is final. What nonsense is this?
The consignment includes a reserve clause. We must verify the buyer's ability to complete, given the transaction's nature.
Verify? What is this, an audit? Some bureaucrat playing games.
Furthermore, the consigneur is present in the building tonight. They've requested a brief meeting before paperwork concludes.
The pen in Gary's hand stopped. A cold line of sweat traced down his temple, though he didn't yet know why. Somewhere in the side gallery, a woman in a camel coat watched him begin to crack.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention please. Before we conclude tonight, the consignor of Lot 204 is here and wishes to greet the winning bidder.
Every head turned. At the side of the room, a private door swung open. Sophia Vance stepped into the light, camel coat open, hands empty. The smile on her face was a blade wrapped in silk.
The consignor was a trust. This can't be Sophia. This is a nightmare.
She walked straight to him, heels clicking on marble. The crowd parted like water. Gary's paddle slipped from his fingers. It hit the marble with a sound like a gunshot.
Hello, Uncle. I believe you've just bought my piano. Thank you for the generous bid.
The room fell into a deathly hush. A program fluttered from a table. The only sound. Gary's mouth opened and closed. No words came, only a strangled gasp. The pianist finally had her stage, and the dealer was left with nothing but a paddle on the floor.
Do you remember the day you sold my mother's Steinway, Uncle? The movers came while I was at school. You said it was necessary.
That was different. The estate had debts.
Debts? I found the appraisal a year later. $400,000, and you pocketed every cent. You lied to a grieving 16-year-old.
How does she know? That record was buried in the filing cabinet. I was protecting you. I did what was necessary for the family.
You did what was necessary for yourself, and now you've bid $600,000 on a piano you can't touch, with a loan you'll never repay. Enjoy the applause, Uncle. It's the last you'll receive. The piano stays with me. The consignor's reserve clause. Goodbye.
She walked toward the exit, her heels echoing in the silent hall. Not once did she look back. Gary stood rooted among the empty champagne flutes, a man whose empire had just been declared a fiction. By morning, the real reckoning would begin not in a concert hall, but in a court of law. The night air was cold as Sophia stepped out of Sotheby's and into a waiting black sedan. She didn't look back. In her studio, the 1927 Steinway sat silent under lamplight. Her phone buzzed. Matthew, again.
Sophia, I've pulled the loan collateral file. 112 Sycamore is still partly titled under your mother's estate. He misrepresented ownership.
So the loan is fraudulent. He listed property he can't legally pledge.
The bank relied on a quitclaim deed he executed 6 years ago. It was never recorded. I'm certain it's a forged document.
He built his empire on paper that would never hold. It's almost too easy.
Matthew was already opening the emergency motion template, his pointer hovering over the court seal.
I can file within 48 hours. A temporary restraining order will freeze the auction proceeds and flag the loan for fraud investigation.
File it. I want the foundation funded and the piano under my name by Friday.
She ended the call. The legal trap was set, and this time, she was the one holding the hammer. At 9 a.m., Matthew filed the emergency motion. The court seal stamped within the hour. The temporary restraining order froze all proceeds from Lot 204 and flagged the buyer's financing for immediate review.
Ms. Hart, the reserve clause is being invoked. The sale is void per the consignor's terms.
Understood? The piano remains yours. We'll notify the auction house immediately.
A day later, Sophia signed the reserve execution in clean black ink. Her name on the line, the first time it appeared publicly. At the bank, a compliance officer stamped the Vance loan file, frozen, collateral unverified. Matthew received the bank's confirmation. The $650,000 line was suspended pending fraud investigation. Sophia read the court filing on her tablet. A faint smile, the same one from the auction. The 1927 Steinway sat untouched, its provenance now bound tighter to her family than any contract. By Friday, the foundation would be funded. The cleanup of Gary Vance's reputation was just beginning. The bank's fraud unit traced the quitclaim deed to an unauthorized notary stamp within days. Gary was summoned to a sterile office. The officer slid a frozen loan notice across the table.
They can't prove intent. I signed what the estate allowed. It's a misunderstanding.
But his business lines were pulled. The showrooms for sale signs soon outnumbered the pianos. Creditors repossessed 3 restored grands from his floor.
No, I can't process that today. Yes, I realize it's overdue. Call back next week.
He slammed the receiver down. The gold cufflinks on his wrists felt like lead. The bank classified the $650,000 loan in default. Legal proceedings were initiated against Vance Vintage Pianos. Gary Vance, the self-styled dean of vintage instruments, was now a debtor of last resort. And in her studio, the piano he'd tried to steal was being tuned for a concert that would never feature his name. 4 months later, the financial section carried a brief notice: vintage piano dealer Gary Vance files for bankruptcy. At a cafe on a crisp autumn morning, Sophia unfolded the paper. The article was short, but the photograph of a weary Gary said everything.
No satisfaction, just silence. As if the last string of an old chord had finally faded.
That afternoon, the Catherine Vance Music Education Foundation held its first grant ceremony. 12 children received scholarships for piano lessons.
Every child deserves a piano that stays. This foundation is my mother's song, finally heard.
Award plaques bore Catherine's likeness, the same woman who once played a Welt Mignon until the keys grew warm. The logo, a musical note intertwined with her name, would now appear on recital programs across the country. The auction proceeds, $612,000 had been transferred in full. Not a cent touched Gary's hands. Sophia folded the newspaper, left a tip, and walked toward her studio. The bankruptcy was just another headline, already yellowing. The only sound that mattered now came from the keys waiting for her at home. The studio was quiet, the Steinway uncovered. From her bag, Sophia drew a small silver frame and held it to the afternoon light.
You should be here, Mom, not just in a photograph.
She placed a frame on the music rack, the spot where a pianist's eyes fall before the first note. The photograph showed Catherine in her 30s, smiling, a smaller piano behind her. The same honey blonde hair, the same knowing eyes. For a long moment, Sophia simply looked. Then she adjusted the frame until the angle was perfect.
Now you'll hear every note, I promise.
The Steinway's keys, once contested in a courtroom, now waited under her fingers like old friends. She sat down on the bench, feeling the familiar give of the velvet cushion. And after a decade of silence, the quiet in the room was no longer empty. It was expectant. Her fingers rested on the cool ivory, not yet striking, but poised. The silence was now a choice. Then the first chord pressed into the hush, the opening of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, her mother's favorite. The melody rose from the strings like a voice returning after a long silence, measured and tender. Her fingers moved from memory, but her eyes stayed on the silver frame, the woman who first taught her that piece.
Every note is for you, Mom. Every single one.
The Nocturne's theme wound through the studio, spilling past the open door into the hallway, a home finally filled. Outside, the city darkened. Inside, the keys caught the lamp's glow, each one a small beacon. She played as if time had folded, the girl at the funeral, the woman at the auction, both seated at this bench.
No one can take this from us now. Not ever again.
The final cadence bloomed and faded. For the first time in a decade, Sophia smiled a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. The music stopped, but the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was the quiet after a promise kept. The camera lingers on the silver frame, now the only light in the room. Catherine's smile holds the quiet, unchanged by years. Around it, the studio fades into a soft blur. The Steinway, the velvet bench, the city outside the window, all secondary to this one memory. In the wide frame, Sophia sits motionless at the instrument. The nocturne is over, but the promise it carried will not fade. The lamplight catches the honey of her hair, the same shade her mother wore at 30, a legacy written in notes and bone. She does not move to close the lid. She does not turn off the lamp. Some inheritances are instruments. Others are the moment you finally play them for the one who listened first. The camera pulls back slowly. Sophia's silhouette blurs against the glowing Steinway. The last sharp image is the photograph. A woman and her piano, together again in the only way that matters. And then gently, the light fades. A single chord seems to hang in the darkness, not struck, but remembered. And then nothing but peace.